This is Simon Moon from Simon Moon Music, and today I would like to talk about Bitwigs Instrument Layer. This is part 12, I think, in my series of tutorials on how to produce music with Bitwig Studio. And I would like to use Bitwig's Instrument Layer to create some kind of uplifting sequence. And in order for you to get the idea, here's what it sounds like. And in the context of our track, I just start playing 4 bars before the uplifter sets in. So I start by creating a new project and get rid of all the tracks that I don't need. Now I will introduce our instrument layer. Sorry, something going wrong. No, I'm selecting Bitwig here. Type in instrument. Here we go. So this is essentially a container, and you can place a number of instruments inside this container, and then all these instruments in the container actually share the MIDI coming in. So if I have this FM4 and a snare, I solo the snare, solo FM4. Now they both share the incoming MIDI, so if I hit a note on the keyboard, it triggers both instruments. I just solo FM4 to start working on the uplifting sequence. We'll need the snare later on, but for now I want to introduce a modulator, and as with all Bitwig Studio 2.0 elements, the instrument layer also comes with a couple of slots for inserting modulators. And the first modulator I want to put in is a macro knob. Well, essentially it's the only modulator that we will be using in this tutorial, because this will be used to actually modulate all the interesting parameters over time so that it increases the intensity of the uplifting sequence. So as a consequence, I will call this, whoops, sorry about that, intensity. To have something to start with, I will select a preset that FM4 comes with. It's called Uplifting Clank, and this sounds by its name already like something we can make use of. And there are a couple of macro knobs already assigned to this preset. So let me start by adding a MIDI sequence that we can listen to over and over again throughout this tutorial. This is going to be interesting. And the rhythm, the underlying rhythm, is basically our essential EDM triplets. I just copy or duplicate this 3 times. Now we have 4 instances. And another thing I want to do is, in order to have some rhythmic orientation, I underlay this by some very basic 4 to the floor kick pattern. Okay, now we can start And we'll work on our first instrument in our instrument layer. The intensity knob, as I said, will be used to actually increase the intensity of that, the felt intensity of the uplifting sequence. So what I'm going to do now is I will simply draw in a automation pattern so that over time you can see the intensity knob move up. But since it's not assigned to anything, you don't hear any effect. But if we start assigning it to some of the more obvious choices in our preset patch here, then you will be able to hear something. Okay, let's start by high pass frequency. The sustain level, I guess, makes sense. Chorus amount, then pitch, obviously, very important in uplifting sequences, and I will also increase the volume a little bit and introduce more reverb over time. So this is what it sounds like now. Sorry. Okay, so let's now have a look at the modulators that this patch already comes with, and like this one, let's check what this is modulating. If you click on this arrow here, then you can see by the green frame that is appearing here that this is obviously modulating operator 3 ratio. If I right click it, then it actually gives you a list of all the modulation targets it's assigned to, and then you can see that it's indeed operator 3 ratio. So what is this doing? While this LFO is going up and down, indicated by this little ball hopping up and down here, the pitch of the output operator, which is operator 1, is modulated by operator 3. And since the ratio here is going up and down based on what the LFO is doing, we hear a pitch wobble. So if I increase this, it becomes even more audible. Okay, but that's actually a ridiculous amount. So how can we use this to include it in increasing intensity over time? Well, first of all, the LFO amount controls to what extent the LFO is actually modulating this ratio here. So if I bring it down, it doesn't do anything. So what I'm going to do now is I assign this as a modulation target for our intensity knob. So this is the first thing I want to do. Maybe also assign a little bit more pitch, another element of pitch change over time, and let me see, maybe also increase modulation or LFO frequency over time. But in order for this to make sense, I have to bring it down in the first place. And now let's listen to what this sounds like. So I guess that's already something. Sounds good the way it is. Now let's have a look at the built-in effects that this patch, this preset comes with. And as you can see, there's a flanger turned off for some reason, and there is a step modulator. Let's see what it is modulating. Okay, it is obviously modulating a comb effect, a comb filter. And if I click here, nothing happens. But if I turn up the mix, then you notice that the frequency the comb filter is triggered with is being modulated over time. So every time I hit a note, the kind of modulation or the frequency of this comb filter is modulated by this step modulator, by the amounts that are indicated by these bars here. So they always sound different, which makes it quite interesting because it breathes some life into this otherwise quite static sound. So how can we modulate this? I think one good idea is, first of all, to modulate the intensity of this effect. So where is it? Here it is. And bring it up to 100%. And we could also modulate that frequency over time. And then let's see what this sounds like now. Okay, let me just check. There's also, okay, we are increasing reverb over time. Very well. Okay, well, that already sounds pretty good to me. I suggest we leave it at that, and I will simply go to the next instrument. Now here we have a snare, and the snare is also supposed not to be not only a static rhythm over time. The rhythm is actually already predefined. It's the same as for that clank sound. So it's these triplets here. But right now, every instance, each single hit sounds like the one before. And in an uplifting sequence, you want to have more and more higher frequencies introduced over time, reduce the lower frequency content, and so on and so on. So we also have to modulate a couple of things for our snare here. And let's simply again try to find some of the more obvious things to modulate. Okay, there is tune. So we increase pitch over time, then we could also make the sound of the snare linger a little bit longer as the uplifter continues. Maybe also high cut and increase low cut over time, and the output. The only thing I have to do now is bring down the output in the beginning, because otherwise we might introduce clipping. So this already changes our sound over time. We could even make this a little bit more drastic, I think, like this. Let me just see what this sounds like then. Okay, more and more low cut, also more drastic effect on the tone. And now to the more interesting parts. You might have noticed that in the end of the uplifting sequence I showed you in the beginning of this tutorial, we had much more snare hits in between, and this can be accomplished by introducing a delay, and that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. So we have a delay, and if I turn up the mix knob like this, and we have now triplet quarter notes, this is what it sounds like. Increase the mix even more. Oh, it doesn't make sense. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to bring in this effect so that at the beginning of the uplifting sequence it's barely audible, and then it comes in more and more in a more and more pronounced manner. So what I'm going to do is I assign the intensity knob to that mix level here, and I go to 50% because if I go over 50% then the dry signal will be reduced, and I don't want that to happen. So let's now check what it sounds like. Okay, so that's already quite nice, but it still could use a little bit more life to it. And in order to do that, I add a flanger. And like before, I will also increase the amount of this effect over time. So I modulate this also with our intensity knob, and I could also maybe let me see. Well, that's fine, I think. Let's just check what this sounds like. And notice that the effect is only affecting the wet delay signal. So it's not the initial hit. Let me just show you. But the flanger is only affecting the reflections coming from the delay. Okay, so then I would like to add another delay that repeats that delay sequence from the first delay, but a little bit later, so that let me see, I also have to introduce this over time, so that in the end of our sequence it is going to sound like this. So if I turn this one off, that's what it sounds like. But if I turn it back on, then it repeats this delay sequence. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, now we have these additional snare hits introduced. I'm thinking I could also increase the filter cutoff of our delays over time a little bit, so that this also becomes brighter. Okay, now I think this should be pretty much it for the snare. But as a last effect, I think I would like to have a little bit more reverb, and Let me check. Does this snare already come with a reverb? No, it doesn't have any wet effects. So good. We're use Bitwigs. Where is it? Sorry. Built-in reverb, and what I'm going to do is I want not so much of the late reflections in the reverb. No pre-delay, because I want the reverb sound to start right with the sound it is reacting to, with maybe a little bit of build-up. And in the beginning I want the sound to be rather dark. So the idea is actually that see, what this does is, as I increase it, the higher frequencies linger longer and longer in our wet signal of the reverb. So I want to start this rather dark and then bring in more and more of the higher frequencies. And also the amount of reverb will be increased over time, again with our intensity button. So let's do it like this. Also increase the amount of reverb. And let's check what it sounds like. Okay, something else? Yes, I think it makes sense to add another EQ, just to be able to control the low frequency action in here over time. And we make this a bell, so that we have an additional filter sweep in here. So what I want to do is, I'm increasing the frequency here over time, and I'm also increasing this the frequency of this second filter node, or EQ node. Okay, so that should do for our snare. One last thing that I would like to do is I would like to add some noise. And as we've already learned in the previous tutorials, the FM4, the frequency modulating synthesizer that Bitwig comes with, has a noise oscillator. So I solo this real quick, and in order to hear it, I have to turn up the cutoff frequency, and obviously turn up the noise oscillator as well. Q factor is too high. If I turn the Q factor up all the way, then you hear that cutoff frequency really as some kind of like almost like a sine wave. Okay, so let's get this to a moderate level. Also, I want a little bit more attack, a little bit more sustain, and some release. Okay, what is it we can obviously modulate here? And I think the obvious choices are, first of all, the cutoff frequency, and maybe drive over time, and then also modulation depth. But that's, I think, enough to start with. Let's see what this sounds like then. Maybe increase Q factor just a little bit. that's good. One thing we could also do is, let me introduce an LFO real quick. No, sorry, that's not what I wanted. An envelope. Where is it? Envelope, no, not envelope follower. Come on, where are you? ADSR. Okay, so this is just a regular attack, decay, sustain, and release setting. And what I want to do is I want to actually use this to have a little peak in volume when the sound sets in. An additional peak, but I'm going to use this later on for other things as well. Okay, now we have our noise, but I think the sound is going to become a lot more interesting if we use the other operators as well. And what I want to do now is I want to use these operators in a way that they also sound rather metallic and rather noisy. So in order to do this, first of all, I bring the pitch of the first one down 1 octave, because I will be modulating this with higher frequency operators, and then the pitch will become higher anyways. So let me just dial in some random values and see what it sounds like if we start modulating this first operator with those. But most important, I want to modulate this this sound with noise, which makes it also noisy by itself. And then let me see, also maybe increase pitch of some of the other operators. And you can hear that our new operator now is already quite noisy. Let's listen to the second one. So this one should be also have more noise quality to it. Not too much. Okay, let me check the first one more time. Okay, maybe let's get back to the original pitch. So what I want to do now, first of all, is hang on a second. First of all, I want to use the ADSR envelope here to modulate how much of these two additional operators are introduced to what we hear when the sound starts to play. But I also want to have them audible to a certain extent all of the time. And now if we mix it with the noise, we have a quite metallic sound, and the metallic quality can be actually controlled by controlling the amount of these first two operators over time, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I also increase the amount of these, or the volume of the other two operators over time during our sequencing. Second operator yes. In order to avoid this annoying, high-pitched sound in the beginning, I will bring in the modulation amount over time. And I will do this actually by two means. First of all, I will add modulation amount at the beginning of the sound. Plus, I will also introduce more and more of that over time as the intensity increases. So, what's the last step? Let me add a little bit more distortion to bring out, after all these years, you would expect that I learned to type. Okay, but I think the drive is far too high. Let's just add a tiny bit of distortion and not go too crazy about this. And now you see that the distortion plugin of Bitwig also comes with a couple of filters. First of all, there is this bandpass filter with a Q factor again, and if I do this, you can hear that the frequency that gets pronounced is changed over time. So this is another interesting thing. We can modulate, and also these high pass and low pass filters that are post to what distortion does here. And we might also add or modulate the mix. So let's simply do this. So I increase the frequency here, the high cut frequency as well, plus the high pass filter. Sorry, the cutoff of the high pass filter and the cutoff of the low pass filter, and I increase the mix level. And now this is what it's going to sound like. So another thing I would like to have here, I'm thinking about actually adding a compressor, but on the other hand, we'll compress all three instruments later on anyways, so I skip that and get back to that later if it's still necessary. But first of all, one thing we could do is, remember we introduced a EQ on our snare channel as well, or on our snare instrument to be more precise, and we'll do the same thing right now, only that now I'm using a high shelf filter here in order to control the frequency amount above something like 6 kilohertz, and also a high pass filter that sets in pretty low and then is being increased over time. So now if I modulate these, I want to modulate the cutoff frequency of the high pass filter and the amount that the higher frequencies above 6 kilohertz get boosted. So now let's listen to all this in context. Very well. Now all I want to do is, like I said, control the dynamics of our instrument layer. And in order to do this, first of all, I will simply add dynamics controls. So I go to Bitwig, where is it? Dynamics. And first of all, I want to take off some of the lowest or softest elements of our wave here. And also compress it. Not too much actually, but I want to compress it with a quite high attack time in order for the transients to get through, and then reduce release time. Only so much that I don't introduce additional distortion. I think it makes sense to add the Bitwig transient control here. And this way I can make sure that the transients are pronounced even further. Like so. But I also want to reduce the tail of each The reason is that if there's too much of the sustain in the sound, it's probably going to muddy up our mix later on. And it makes it breathe a little bit, so it sounds much better than before, I think. Let's listen to this without and then with. Okay, so we have, I think, our uplifter. I hope this was somewhat understandable and comprehensible. If you like this, please subscribe. And well, what is going to be next? I think, first of all, I will complete the track, and then I make another video which I'll upload that simply plays back the track. And in this video, I will actually I make an announcement on how to grab the Bitwig Studio project file for all this. So I'll make this available for you. I still have to think about the conditions, I think, but well, I'll talk about that in the next tutorial. Hope you like this. Hope I'll see you soon in one of the next tutorials. Have a nice day. Bye bye.